Part 1: The Empty Chair. The great chamber of the Galactic Concord stretched for miles in every direction. Crystal walls rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves, and floating platforms carried thousands of alien diplomats to their assigned seats. This was the most important gathering in the known universe. Every 100 years, all the species of the galaxy came together on the world called Prime to discuss peace, trade, and the future of all living things. Ambassador clicked his mandibles together as his platform lowered him to the section. His species looked like giant insects to human eyes, with hard shells of deep blue and 4 arms that never stopped moving. The hegemony controlled more than 2,000 star systems and was proud to represent them. He had been coming to these assemblies for 60 years, and he had seen many things. But today, something felt wrong. He looked around the chamber as more and more species took their seats. They were there, of course. They were massive creatures, each one the size of a small building, with skin and eyes that glowed with ancient wisdom. They spoke slowly and thought even slower, but their words carried weight. They floated in their special section, beings of pure light who communicated through flashes and pulses that most species needed machines to understand. The Void Singers, the Machine Collective, all of them were present. All except one. Earth's seat was empty. Stared at the small platform designated for humanity's representative. It had been empty for 12 years now. At first, no one had thought much of it. Humans were young. They had only joined the Concord 40 cycles ago, and they were still learning the ways of galactic society. Perhaps they were dealing with some internal problem. Perhaps they had simply forgotten. But 12 years was a long time, even by galactic standards. "They are not coming again," said his assistant. The younger seemed almost pleased. "The humans have finally accepted their place. They were never meant for the stars." Did not respond. He was thinking about the humans he had met over the years. Strange creatures, soft, fragile, with no natural weapons or armor. They lived such short lives, barely 100 years for even the oldest among them. And yet, there had been something about them that made uncomfortable. They had been so eager, so willing to help. When they suffered a great earthquake, humans had sent ships filled with aid before anyone else even responded. When the Void Singers faced a plague, human scientists had worked without sleep for months to find a cure. They had volunteered for every dangerous mission, every difficult negotiation, every thankless task. They had smiled while doing it. Remembered the human ambassador, a woman named Sarah. She had been small, even by human standards, with dark skin and hair that curled close to her head. But when she spoke, even the had listened. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel like she could see inside your soul. He remembered the last time he had seen her. It was 12 years ago at the previous assembly. The Concord had been voting on what they called the incident. A mining fleet had entered a system claimed by humanity, a small colony world called Seven. The miners had wanted the asteroids in the system, and the human colony was in the way, so they had removed it. They had removed it completely. 2.3 million humans had lived on Seven. Families, children, scientists who studied the strange purple plants that grew there, artists who painted the twin sunsets, teachers, doctors, farmers, dreamers, all of them, gone in a flash of nuclear fire. The hegemony had called it an accident. They had expressed regret. They had offered a small payment to Earth's government and asked the Concord to declare the matter closed. The vote had been close. Many species had wanted to punish the hegemony, but they were powerful and they had many allies. In the end, the Concord had ruled that the destruction of Seven was regrettable, but within acceptable parameters of interstellar expansion. Remembered Sarah's face when the vote was announced. She had not cried. She had not screamed. She had simply stood there, very still, and looked at each representative in turn. Her eyes had moved from face to face, from species to species, and had felt a chill run through his shell when her gaze met his. There had been no anger in those eyes, no grief, just something else. something that in all his centuries of life had never seen before. Then she had turned and walked out of the chamber. She had not said a single word. The next day, humanity went silent. At first, the conquered had sent messages, polite inquiries, formal requests for communication. All of them received the same response. Earth thanks the galactic conquered for its concern. Humanity is addressing internal matters. Nothing more, nothing less. The same message over and over for 12 years. Rumors had spread, of course. The belief that humanity had destroyed itself in nuclear war. They had always said humans were too aggressive for their own good. The thought perhaps a plague had killed them all. Some species believed humans had simply given up, retreating to there in shame and despair. Had never believed any of it. He looked at the empty seat again and felt the same chill he had felt 12 years ago. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Across the chamber, High Arbiter of the was having similar thoughts. She was ancient, even by the standards of her kind, nearly 5,000 years old. She had seen species rise and fall. She had watched empires crumble and new civilizations take their place. She had learned to trust her instincts. And her instincts were screaming at her now. She remembered Sarah too. She remembered the look in the human's eyes, not just the absence of anger, but the presence of something else. Something that had only seen a few times in her long life. It was the look of someone making a decision, a final decision, a decision that could not be undone. Looked at the empty chair and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Her light dimmed, flickering with an emotion that her kind rarely experienced. Fear. Something is coming, she whispered to herself, something terrible. But no one heard her. The assembly continued, and the empty chair sat silent in the great chamber, waiting. Far away, beyond the reach of conquered sensors, beyond the borders of known space, something was indeed coming. In the darkness between stars, shadows moved. Ships that no alien eye had ever seen slid through the void like ghosts. And on the bridge of the largest vessel humanity had ever built, a woman with streaked hair stared at a holographic map of the galaxy. Her name was, and she had been waiting for this day for 12 long years. "Admiral," said her first officer, "we're receiving word. The conquered assembly has begun." Nodded slowly. Her eyes never left the map. "Good," she said, "it's time." Part 2. The silence before. 12 years earlier, the city of Geneva was quiet. It was a cold morning in December, and snow was falling softly on the streets. The old buildings of the city had seen many important moments in human history, but none quite like this. Deep beneath the surface, in a bunker that had been built centuries ago and forgotten by most, the leaders of Earth had gathered. Admiral stood at the front of the room. She was 45 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too much death. Behind her, holographic screens displayed the names of the dead. 2.3 million names, scrolling endlessly, never stopping. The room was full of the most powerful people on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, scientists, they had all come. Some were crying, some were shaking with rage. Some simply sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what had happened. "The Galactic Conquered has made its decision," said. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could see the tension in her shoulders. "The destruction of 7 has been ruled an acceptable loss. There will be no punishment, no justice, no consequence for the murder of our people." The room exploded. A general from China stood up, slamming his fist on the table. "Then we go to war, we make them pay." "With what?" shouted a scientist from India. "They have 10,000 warships, we have 300, we would be dead in a month. Better to die fighting than to accept this shame." "And what about the 8 billion people still alive on Earth? Should they die for your pride?" The arguments grew louder and angrier, watched without speaking. She had expected this. Humans were emotional creatures, It was both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. Finally, an old man at the back of the room raised his hand. The room fell silent immediately. Even the most powerful leaders on Earth respected. He was 93 years old, his hair completely white, his body frail and bent. But his mind was still sharp, and his voice, though soft, carried to every corner of the room. Had been the first human to make contact with alien life. He had negotiated humanity's entry into the Galactic Concord. He had believed, truly believed, that the stars held friendship and wonder. Now he looked like a man whose heart had been broken. "We cannot win a war," he said simply. "The general is right, we would be destroyed. The alone could crush us, and they have allies. The conquered would not even need to vote. We would simply cease to exist." "Then what do you suggest?" asked the President of the United States. "That we do nothing, that we accept the murder of our people and move on." Smiled. It was a strange smile, sad and bitter and something else that could not quite identify. "No," he said, "I suggest we do everything, but not the way they expect." He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "The aliens have made a mistake," he continued. "A very serious mistake. They think they know us. They think we are like them, rational, predictable, willing to accept our place in the order of things. They think that because we are young and weak, we will stay young and weak forever." He leaned forward in his chair. "They do not understand what we are. They do not know what humans can do when they are angry, when they are united, when they have nothing left to lose." He turned to, "Admiral, how long would it take to rebuild our fleet? Not just replace what we have, but truly rebuild, with new technology, new weapons, new ships." Frowned, she had been thinking about this question for weeks. With our current resources, 20 years, maybe 30. And if we had unlimited resources? If every factory on Earth, every scientist, every engineer, every worker was dedicated to a single purpose? His eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. "You're talking about total mobilization, a war economy." "I am talking about becoming something new," said. "They have had 2,000 years to build their empire. They have existed for 10,000. They improve slowly, carefully, never taking risks. They have never faced a species that can remake itself in a generation." He stood up, and despite his age, there was iron in his spine. "We will go silent. We will tell the galaxy nothing. And while they forget about us, while they laugh at the primitive humans who ran away in shame, we will work. We will build. We will innovate. We will take every piece of technology we have ever encountered and make it better. We will create weapons they cannot imagine, ships they cannot fight. We will become powerful enough to make the entire galaxy tremble." The room was silent. And then someone asked. Smile faded. "And then we will show them what happens when you kill our children." The vote was unanimous. In the months that followed, Earth changed. Factories that had made consumer goods now made ship components. Universities that had studied art and philosophy now focused on weapons research and starship design. Mines dug deeper than ever before, pulling precious metals from the Earth's crust. Space stations were built in secret, hidden behind the moon, behind asteroids, anywhere the conquered sensors could not reach. And the people of Earth worked, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. 2.3 million names burned in their hearts. Every parent thought of the children who had died on Seven. Every child grew up knowing what the galaxy had done to their people. The anger did not fade. It grew. It hardened. It became something cold and patient and utterly unstoppable. Led the military effort. She had lost her sister on Seven, her sister and her 2 young nephews. Every night she looked at their pictures before she went to sleep. Every morning she woke up and continued the work. Years passed. Human scientists made breakthroughs that should have taken centuries. They cracked the secrets of faster-than-light travel, creating engines that could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. They developed weapons that could punch through any known shield technology. They built ships that moved like thoughts, responding to their pilots' intentions before conscious commands could be given. In secret shipyards scattered across the solar system, a new fleet took shape. Not hundreds of ships, thousands, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And at the center of it all, in the largest construction yard ever built, something special was being created. A ship so massive that it would blot out stars. A ship that would carry humanity's message to the conquered. They called it the Prometheus. Died in the 8th year. He passed peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family and closest friends. His last words were a question: "Is it ready?" Who had been at his bedside had shaken her head. Not yet, for more years. The old man had smiled and closed his eyes. "Good," he had whispered, "make them remember." 4 years later, the fleet was ready. Admiral, now haired and hard-eyed, stood on the bridge of the Prometheus. Around her, thousands of crew members worked at their stations. Behind her, visible through the massive, the fleet stretched for miles, sleek black ships that looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral," said her first officer, "we're receiving word. The conquered assembly has begun." Nodded. 12 years, 12 years of silence, 12 years of work, 12 years of cold, patient fury. "Set course for Prime," she said. "It's time to remind the galaxy who we are." The fleet moved as one, sliding into faster-than-light travel, vanishing from human space like ghosts. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson. Humans forgive, but they never, ever forget. Part 3: The Awakening. The Galactic Conquered Assembly had been in session for 3 hours when the alarms began. At first, no one understood what was happening. The warning sounds were old, built into the systems of Prime centuries ago and never used. Most species did not even recognize them. But they who had designed the warning systems in ancient times knew exactly what they meant. Something was coming, something big. High Arbiter rose from her seat, her light flickering rapidly in a pattern of alarm. "Clear the chamber," she ordered. "All representatives, return to your ships immediately." But it was too late. The massive holographic display at the center of the chamber came to life on its own. No one had activated it. The image showed the edge of conquered space, a region of empty darkness that bordered the unexplored territories where humanity's small domain had once been. The darkness was no longer empty. Ships poured out of faster-than-light travel like water from a broken dam. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. They were black as the void between stars, sleek and angular, covered in weapons that pulsed with strange energy. They moved in perfect formation, each ship exactly where it should be, as if they were all controlled by a single mind. Ambassador watched with growing horror as the sensors tried to identify the vessels. The readings made no sense. The ships were using technology that the Conquered's computers could not recognize. Their engines operated on principles that seemed impossible. Their weapons' signatures were completely unknown. But the symbols on their hulls were very familiar. Blue and green circles, the image of a small planet covered in oceans and continents. "Earth." "Impossible," whispered beside him. "The humans, they couldn't. This is impossible." But it was not impossible. It was very, very real. At the front of the fleet, visible now as the image zoomed in, was a ship unlike any other. It was massive, larger than any vessel ever built by any species. If the sensor readings were correct, it was the size of a small moon. Its surface bristled with weapon systems that made even the battle stations look like toys. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to watch. The Prometheus had arrived. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had not known fear and suddenly remembered what it felt like. The representatives were shouting orders into their communication devices, trying to reach their military commanders. They were slowly, too slowly, beginning to move toward the exits. The smaller species simply fled, their diplomatic platforms spinning wildly as they raced for safety. Only remained calm. She watched the holographic display with her ancient eyes and felt something strange. Not fear exactly, something more like recognition. She had seen this before. Thousands of years ago, when her own species had been young, they had faced a similar moment. A weaker species, pushed too far, had risen up against their oppressors. The galaxy had changed forever. Now it was happening again. The holographic display flickered, and suddenly a face appeared. Human, female. Hair pulled back from a face that was lined with age but hard as stone. Her eyes were cold and steady, showing no emotion at all. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Fleet," she said. Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if she were discussing the weather rather than appearing with an armada that could destroy worlds. "We apologize for our absence. We have been busy." The chamber fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every attention was fixed on the human woman's face. 12 years ago, your conquered made a decision," continued. "The hegemony murdered 2.3 million of our people. Men, women, children, families. An entire world burned to ash because it was in the way of a mining operation." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And your conquered, your great gathering of civilized species, ruled that this was acceptable, within normal parameters, regrettable but not worthy of punishment." Her eyes moved slowly across the chamber, and even through a holographic display, her gaze made one hide. "You taught us something valuable that day," said. "You taught us that in this galaxy the only law is power. The strong do what they want. The weak suffer what they must. There is no justice. There is no fairness. There is only power." She gestured, and the view behind her changed. It showed the fleet again, spreading across space like a shadow covering stars. "So we went home, and we built power." Admiral leaned forward slightly. "You thought we were gone. You thought we had destroyed ourselves, or given up, or simply accepted our place as a minor species in a galaxy of giants. Some of you laughed at the silly little humans who had dared to dream of equality. Some of you forgot we existed at all." Her voice hardened. "We did not forget. Every day for 12 years we remembered. We remembered the names of our dead. We remembered the faces of our children. We remembered the vote that told us our lives were worth nothing. And while we remembered, we worked. Our scientists took your technology and made it better. Our engineers built ships that your minds cannot understand. Our soldiers trained until they could fight in ways you cannot imagine. We did in 12 years what other species take centuries to accomplish. Because humans do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not accept our place. When the universe tells us that we cannot do something, we find a way to do it anyway. It is what we are. It is what we have always been." She straightened. "And now we are here." The holographic display showed the fleet beginning to move. Not toward Prime, not yet, but in a very specific direction, toward the heart of space. "We are going to visit the of the hegemony," announced. "We are going to show them what we have built, and then we are going to have a conversation about justice." She looked directly at, as if she could see him through the display. "You can try to stop us if you wish. Your fleet outnumbers ours 3-1. By all logic, you should be able to defeat us. By all the rules of galactic warfare, we should not stand a chance." She smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "But here is the thing about humans. We never really believed in logic. And we certainly do not believe in rules that say we should accept injustice because we are too small to fight back. You wonder why Earth's seat was empty for 12 years. Now you know. We were becoming something new, something this galaxy has never seen. We were becoming what we needed to be to survive." She turned away from the camera. "This is Admiral, in transmission." The holographic display went dark. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The great chamber of the Galactic Concord, which had seen 1,000 years of diplomatic discussion, was completely silent. Then Ambassador did something he had never done before in his long life. He began to pray. Because deep in his ancient heart, the diplomat understood something that many of his fellow species had not yet realized. He understood that the galaxy had changed forever. He understood that the rules of power, rules that the hegemony had used for, no longer applied. And he understood with terrible clarity that the humans were not bluffing. They had come for justice, and they were going to get it. Part 4, The Reckoning. It was called Ra. It was a beautiful planet, covered in vast forests of crystal trees that sang when the wind blew through them. 3 moons hung in its sky, and the great cities of the hegemony stretched across its continents like jewels scattered on green velvet. 12 billion lived on this world. For 2,000 years, they had ruled their empire from these ancient cities. They had conquered hundreds of species, built fleets that could darken stars, and made themselves the most feared power in the galaxy. Today, they would learn what fear truly meant. The hegemony's fleet assembled in orbit above Ra, 10,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons that had never known defeat. Battleships the size of mountains, carriers filled with fighter craft, destroyers that moved like sharks through the void. It was the greatest military force in galactic history. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of the flagship and watched his fleet take position. He was old, even by standards, with a shell that had turned almost black with age. He had fought in 30 wars and never lost a battle. "Let them come," he said to his officers. "These humans are bold, I will grant them that, but boldness is not victory. We outnumber them 3-1. We will crush them and then move on to destroy their pathetic." His officers clicked their mandibles in agreement. They had all seen the reports from Prime. They knew the humans were coming, but none of them truly believed that such a young, primitive species could threaten the might of the hegemony. They were wrong. The human fleet arrived without warning. One moment, the space around Ra was empty except for the hegemony's ships. The next moment, the stars themselves seemed to dim as thousands of black vessels materialized from faster-than-light travel. And at their center, blocking out the light of Ra's sun, was the Prometheus. The battle began immediately. They opened fire with everything they had. Thousands of weapons blazed to life, filling space with energy beams and missiles and kinetic projectiles. It was enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. It was not enough. The human ships moved like nothing had ever seen. They did not fly in straight lines or follow predictable patterns. They danced. They twisted. They seemed to know where the weapons would be before they were fired. Missiles missed. Energy beams hit empty space. Kinetic rounds passed through shadows. And then the humans fired back. Their weapons were something new, something terrible. Blue-white beams of energy that cut through shields like they were not there. Missiles that moved faster than the eye could follow, striking with perfect accuracy. Some kind of weapon that no one had ever seen before. A pulse of darkness that seemed to simply erase whatever it touched. Ships began to die. Not one at a time, but in groups. Entire squadrons vanished in flashes of light. Battleships that had survived centuries of warfare were cut in half by weapons they could not understand. Carriers exploded before they could launch their fighters. The flagship's shields, which were supposed to be invincible, flickered and failed under the assault. Watched his fleet die and felt something he had never experienced before: terror. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are humans. They have only existed for a few thousand years. They cannot have technology this advanced." No one could answer him. The battle lasted 6 hours. By any measure, it should have been impossible. They had every advantage: numbers, experience, knowledge of the battlefield. The humans should have been destroyed in the first hour. Instead, the humans won. But they did not win the way they would have won. They did not destroy the enemy fleet completely. Instead, as ship after ship fell, the humans stopped killing. Their weapons, so deadly moments before, began to target engines instead of reactors, life support systems instead of crew quarters. They disabled rather than destroyed. When the battle ended, more than 8,000 ships drifted helplessly in space, dead in the water but not dead. Their crews were alive, terrified, helpless but alive. His flagship was one of them. He stood on a dark bridge, surrounded by officers who no longer knew what to do and waited for the end to come. The Prometheus moved slowly toward Ra. It was so large that it blocked out one of the moons. The planet itself seemed to shrink beneath its shadow. And then Admiral's face appeared on every screen on the planet. Every home, every street, every city. 12 billion looked up and saw the face of humanity's judgment. "People of Ra," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "I want you to understand something before we continue." She paused. "We could destroy your world right now. Every city, every forest, every living thing. It would take us about 4 hours. By morning, your planet would be a ball of dead rock and your species would be a memory." 12 billion held their breath. "But we are not going to do that." His expression did not change. "Because we are not you. 12 years ago, your people killed 2.3 million of ours. You burned an entire world because it was convenient. And when we asked for justice, your government laughed. Your conquered declared that our children's lives were worth nothing. You thought we would simply accept this. You thought we would go away and be forgotten. We did not forget, but we also did not become like you. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is over. The systems you control will declare independence within the week. The species you have conquered for centuries will finally be free. Your hegemony will fall, not because we destroyed it, but because you were never strong enough to hold it together without fear." She leaned forward. "But your people will live. Your cities will stand. Your children will grow up and have children of their own, because humans do not murder innocents. We do not burn worlds for convenience. We are not what you tried to make us become." Her voice hardened. "This is your punishment, Ra. Not death. Life. You will live with the knowledge of what you did. You will tell your children about the day humanity returned, and they will ask why this happened, and you will have to explain that it was because you thought our lives did not matter. Every species in this galaxy will know your shame. Every world will remember what the hegemony did to Seven. And every time they look at you, they will think about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." She stood up. "We could have been friends. We came to the stars hopping to find friendship and wonder. You showed us that the galaxy is cruel. You showed us that power is all that matters. But you did not break us. You made us stronger. And now we are strong enough to choose mercy, not because we are weak, but because we are better than you ever were." The transmission ended. On the surface of Ra, 12 billion looked up at the shadow that covered their sky. Many of them were crying, something the galaxy had never seen before. The great hegemony, rulers of 1,000 worlds, had been brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as primitive. And they were alive. Somehow that made it worse. Supreme Commander sat in the darkness of his broken bridge and thought about the human woman's words. She had given them mercy when they deserved death. She had shown them kindness when they had shown humanity only cruelty. He understood now what he had not understood before. The humans had not just defeated the hegemony. They had won something far more important. They had won the right to define what victory meant. And they had defined it as something greater than destruction. As the human fleet began to withdraw, leaving the broken remnants of the hegemony to contemplate their fate, spoke softly into the darkness. "We were fools," he said. "We had no idea what we were dealing with." No one answered, but somewhere in the vast chamber of the galactic conquered, where representatives of 100 species watched the broadcast in stunned silence, Ambassador felt a strange emotion stirring in his ancient heart. It might have been shame, or it might have been hope. He was not sure which. Part 5: The New Order. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Ra. The Galactic Concord still met on Prime, in the same great chamber where species had gathered for 1,000 years. But everything else had changed. Earth's seat was no longer empty. It was no longer a small platform on the edge of the chamber either. It sat at the very center, raised above the others, and the symbol of Earth, blue and green, beautiful and fragile, hung in holographic light above it. Ambassador David walked slowly to his place. He was young for such a responsibility, only 35 years old, but he carried himself with the weight of someone much older. His grandfather had dreamed of humanity taking its place among the stars. Now his grandson was here to make sure that dream became real. The chamber fell silent as David took his seat. Representatives of 100 species watched him with eyes and sensors and other senses that humans did not even have names for. Some watched with fear, some with hope, some with bitter resentment. All of them watched with respect. "Thank you for gathering today," David said. His voice was calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. "Before we begin formal business, I want to speak honestly about what has happened and what comes next." He looked around the room, meeting the gaze of species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and unimportant. "My people did not want this. We came to the stars hopping to find friends, partners, a community of minds working together toward something greater than any one species could achieve alone. We believed in the conquered. We believed in cooperation. We believed that if we worked hard enough and proved ourselves worthy, we would be accepted." His expression did not change, but something in his voice grew harder. "You taught us that we were wrong. When they murdered our people, we asked for justice. We did not demand vengeance. We did not threaten war. We simply asked that someone be held responsible for the deaths of 2.3 million of our children, and you said no. Your conquered looked at us and decided that our lives were worth less than the convenience of a mining operation. You taught us that in this galaxy, the weak have no rights. The strong do what they want, and we were weak." He paused. "So we became strong." The holographic display above the chamber flickered to life, showing images that made even the flinch. Human ships spread across the galaxy like a net, stationed at every major junction, every critical system, every place where conflict might arise. The fleet was enormous, far larger than any species had realized. "We built enough power to burn this entire galaxy to ash," David said. "We could destroy every world that voted against us. We could end species that have existed for millions of years. We could become the tyrants that you taught us we needed to be." He shook his head slowly. "But we choose not to. Not because we are weak, not because we are afraid, because we remember who we wanted to be when we first looked up at the stars, because we still believe in something greater than power and fear." His voice softened. "The old conquered failed because it had no justice. The strong did what they wanted and the weak suffered. There were no consequences for cruelty, no protection for the innocent, no hope for those who could not protect themselves. That ends today." He stood up. "Humanity will use its power to protect the innocent. We will defend species that cannot defend themselves. We will hold the powerful accountable when they harm the weak. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is the new law of the stars." The chamber was completely silent. Not even the lights flickered. "I know that many of you are afraid," David continued. "I know that you expect us to be cruel, to be vengeful, to punish you for what was done to our people. That is what you would do if you were in our position. That is what the galaxy has always done." He smiled, and it was a gentle smile. the first truly warm expression the chamber had seen from a human in over a year. But we are not what you expected, we never have been. We are going to build something new, a Concord that actually works, a galaxy where species can grow and explore and create without fear, a future where children, all children of every species, can look up at the stars and feel hope instead of terror. He sat back down. You wondered why Earth's seat was empty for 12 years. Now you know. We were becoming something new, something this galaxy has never seen before. We were becoming humanity. The centuries that followed proved that David had spoken the truth. Human fleets spread across the galaxy, but they did not conquer. They protected. When a smaller species was threatened by a larger one, human ships appeared to keep the peace. When disputes arose between ancient enemies, human diplomats worked tirelessly to find solutions. When natural disasters struck distant worlds, human aid ships arrived with food, medicine, and willing hands. It was not always easy. There were those who tried to take advantage of human kindness. There were species that tested humanity's patience, pushing boundaries to see how far they could go. There were moments when the temptation to use overwhelming force must have been almost unbearable. But the humans held firm. Generation after generation, they kept their promise. They became the guardians they had said they would be, strict but fair, powerful but restrained, always willing to talk, always ready to help, but never forgetting that the galaxy had once tried to break them. In time, the fear faded. Species that had once trembled at the sight of human ships began to feel something else instead, something like gratitude, something like trust. New species emerged and joined the conquered. They learned the history of the galaxy, the incident, the silence, the reckoning, the new order that had risen from the ashes of the old. They learned about the humans who had been pushed too far and had chosen mercy instead of revenge. And they learned the saying that was passed down from parent to child, from elder to young one, in every language across the stars. Be kind to humans, they will be kind in return. But never make them remember why they built the ships. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, a monument stood in the central square. It was simple, just a wall of dark stone with names carved into it. 2.3 million names, one for each person who had died on 7. Every year on the anniversary of the massacre, humans gathered at the monument. They brought flowers. They lit candles. They read the names aloud, every single one, no matter how long it took. And at the end of the ceremony, they looked up at the stars and remembered. They remembered the pain. They remembered the anger. They remembered the long years of silent preparation. They remembered the moment when they had held the fate of the galaxy in their hands and chosen to be better than their enemies. They remembered that they had come to the stars hopping for friends. And in the end, after everything that had happened, they had become something even greater. They had become humanity. High above the Earth, visible on clear nights as a tiny point of light, the Prometheus still orbited. It was a museum now, a reminder of what humanity had built and why. Children took field trips to walk its ancient corridors and imagine what it must have been like to stand on that bridge 12 years after 7, looking at a galaxy that had wronged them so deeply. Most of them could not really understand it. The old hatred was gone, replaced by something calmer, something wiser. But they all knew the stories. They all knew what their ancestors had done and what they had chosen not to do. And somewhere in the depths of space, where the light of distant stars painted the void in colors beyond human vision, the universe continued its endless dance. Species rose and fell. Empires crumbled and new ones took their place. The galaxy changed, as galaxies always do. But one thing remained constant. In a galaxy that had once measured power only in weapons and fear, there was now a species that measured power differently. A species that had learned the hardest lesson the universe had to teach, that true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the courage to show mercy. The humans had remembered their dead, but they had also remembered who they wanted to be. And in the end, that made all the difference.